This episode of The Unstarving Musician is powered by Bandzoogle, helping musicians around the world create professional artist websites. I somewhat recently moved my own artist website over to Bandzoogle. You can see it at urbanzo.com. I'm a longtime WordPress user and website designer, so trying a system like Bandzoogle was kind of a big deal to me. But I know that WordPress ain't that easy to learn, and lots of musicians have no interest in learning how to use WordPress, but will try something purported to be easy to use. Well, it doesn't get much easier than Bandzoogle. I've talked about the numerous features they have at the front end of other episodes, but after talking to Dave Kuhl, VP of Business Development with Bandzoogle, I learned about several other features that are especially interesting right now, such as crowdfunding, subscriptions, donations, and all of that without fees added. They also have tools to help you sell merch, tickets to your shows, build your email list, and more. They have support 7 days a week. So look, go to bandzoogle.com to start a 30-day free trial. You can use the promo code ROBONZO to get 15% off your first year. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO. Let's do the show. Greetings, rock stars, and welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. I'm your host, Robonzo. On this podcast, I have conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals. It's all intended to help indie artists be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love, which is, of course, to make music. Do you want to help others find this podcast? You can do so by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It really does help. The Unstarving Musician podcast is made possible through the generosity of listeners like you. One of the easiest ways to offer support is to join the Unstarving Musician community, and you can do so by going to unstarvingmusician.com and join right there on the homepage. As a member, you'll receive from me tips and lessons you can use in your music journey, and this is not just stuff coming from me and my years of experience as a gigging musician, but also from the hundreds of other musicians I've talked to as part of this project and podcast. You'll also get a free copy of the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs ebook, and that is all free just for being part of the community. To learn more about the other ways of offering your support, please visit our sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd-sponsor. Judy Rodman, my guest for this episode, is in a special club in that this is her third appearance on the podcast. If you're curious about that, it helps that she's a member of the Unstarving Musician community. We're in regular contact largely because of that, but there's other reasons too. We wanted to talk about life in the new pandemic era, particularly among musicians. She is wisely focused on 4 specific areas for getting by: staying well, creating and learning, being useful to others, and improving ourselves and our skill sets. We also talk about the world of voiceover recording and recording separately, recording at home, and media placement. Judy wants to prepare us for the fact that a return to things like concerts will take at minimum, I can't talk, I swear, 18 months to 2 years. Who knows, maybe longer. I won't make any predictions. I mean, I will, but not here, not now. So we're back to the reminder that we mustn't depend on a single source of income in this conversation. As independent music artists, we have to think, always have to think beyond the single source of income. Judy has been featured, by the way, in episodes 39 and 133 of The Unstarving Musician. How'd she get back here so fast? Again, I really do think it's because she's part of the Unstarving Musician community. Seriously. But she gets involved, too. That matters. You know, for what it's worth. Here's me and Judy Rodman. Judy, thank you for coming back onto the Unstarving Musician. I appreciate you and your time.
Always good to talk to you, Roberto.
Yeah, I pretty much think about you all the time, and if that sounds weird, it's just because I got to meet you in person, which is a little unique in my world of podcasting, because I don't always get to meet all of my guests, and as you know, I've been on a vocal journey of my own. So
I like to plant my voice in the back of people's heads.
Yeah, and I guess the fact that we stay in touch by email, and thanks for that, by the way. You're part of the community, so to speak, and you often come back with tidbits that are worth a read, including the one that led us to our call today. I'd sent out an email asking all of my prior guests what you've been doing differently lately, knowing that things are very different. And I guess it's worth mentioning for future listeners that we're recording our conversation on April 24th of 2020. So we're in this epidemic era, and at the moment, no live music, among other things, for musicians. So I saw that you had some cool blog and podcast content on a couple of episodes, actually, I wanted to ask you about. But I guess going back to not the most recent one, but a super recent one, I just kind of want to ask you what your thoughts are for this odd time that we find ourselves in as it relates to the singer and the musician.
Well, it's definitely not a time we can compare to anything else, although a lot of people compare it to the era of the Depression or the Spanish flu or the H1N1 more recently, or any of the wars and all this kind of stuff. It brings up human ingenuity, a human fear. Said in my podcast is I boiled it down to three basic things I'm focusing on anyway. And that one is that we've got to live through it. And two, we can create and train. We can create our art and actually train to be better at what we do. And then three, we need to be of use. And if we can do those three things, we'll come out better. I do believe that venues and a lot of most musicians and singers are going to have to find alternate streams of income during this time. But that's a sane thing to do for anybody in the arts anyway, because commercial success is not always happening at doesn't matter how good you are. Sometimes you might just be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe you're really, really good, but the market kind of goes down for your particular thing, and then it comes up again later or something like that. So we're always riding these waves of popularity in the commercial field. So for instance, Tammy Wynette never gave up on renewing her hairdresser license for all of her life until the day she died. She had a current hairdresser license.
Well, she had to work for that. That was smart.
Part of the principle. Yeah. So that's what I think it, as far as the first thing, to live through it, I think it's important to rev up and dig into what we need to do for our bodies and our minds and our spirits. We need to not only live through it, but actually come out physically better and mentally better. And spiritually better, and maybe get rid of some bad habits. I mean, this would definitely be the time to quit smoking, since this is a terrible disease of the lungs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a lot of good that can happen if we pay attention and we act wisely.
Yeah, and so I guess let's go to the second of the areas that you've been focusing on lately, create and train. That speaks, those two words, knowing what we know about each other and about peers and people we want to serve and as observers, means a lot to me. But can you, for the sake of our listeners, kind of dive into that a little bit and tell me what you mean? Sure.
First of all, it's a different part of our brain that creates than performs. And a lot of times an artist's second album is not nearly as good as their first album. And that's because they are on the road performing and promoting the first album, and instead of creating something. And so it's difficult to get into a different mindset when you're on the road sometimes. So we have time now to sit with our bad selves and actually write more songs and create more material and dig into our artistic definition, which is, what is our message? Who am I? What do I know about the world and life and love that would actually be of benefit to somebody? Well, what's a story I can create about that? Or what's a song? What's a situation? What's a movie scene that I could create to kind of share that message. And so we dig a little deeper and we get more authentic rather than just try to figure out where the market's heading, kind of dig into our own artistic callings, I guess would be a good way to put it. So that lets our automatic nervous systems kind of play a little bit better. And the other thing, the second word, of course, is train. Train. Get better at what you do. You know, the guitar playing, the singing, the music business part of that. You know, we can really dig into lessons, and there's all kinds of free lessons on the internet, along with the paid ones. We can network with each other and train, you know, and get feedback with each other. If we come out of this era, we better be better than when we went into it, or we'll be behind the eight ball because a lot of other people are going to be.
Yeah, and you know, maybe this thought will lead us into the idea of being useful, but which is another area that it appears you've been focusing on, and that is that maybe some are struggling right now to just struggling because it is a difficult time, and maybe they've been indirectly or directly impacted by COVID-19 and yeah, or just having challenges, or maybe like in my case, I know it's different for everyone, but in Panama we're under 24/7 quarantine, which means and alcohol is under prohibition currently. So
oh man,
yeah, so what that means, the hardest part of it, unless you're dependent upon alcohol, is that we can't move about as freely, and in our situation we have specific days in specific time windows that we can go out, and as of late we've had complete weekend lockdown, shut-ins, lockdowns, no access to the beaches, public facilities, and I know some of this affects everyone, and it can, in my case I have a wonderful partner that actually appears to enjoy spending time with me. We're practiced. Yeah, we're practiced at it, so that helped. And we were practiced at being at home a lot. We work from home. We cook at home a lot. But we have our circle of friends. So anyway, point being that surely a lot of people are in different circumstances, and just this is weighing a lot heavier for some than it is for others. So I thought maybe that leads into this part about be useful. But if it doesn't, what would you say to anyone who feels that, oh, that's me, I'm struggling?
Yes. Being useful to somebody else, helping somebody else is the quickest way out of your own fear, out of your own center of navel gazing, like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And yes, I know I'm lucky too. Like you, I'm used to working from home and all that. And I'm very lucky. I'm very cognizant of that. But there are a lot of people who depend on getting, outside their home to go to work. And a lot of people who work at businesses that are closed and may never reopen, to tell you the truth. And for those people, there really is, fear of not having a place to live, of not having food to eat, and all that other kind of stuff. But no matter what situation we find ourselves in, we can look at the person next to us and smile. We can check up on our neighbor or our relative who might be lonely too and can't get on the internet. Just reaching out of ourselves is so incredibly important. And those of us who are lucky and do have, at least for right now, sustenance coming in and kind of are in sort of a safe place, even though it might be a boring place, but it's kind of a safe place. We need to reach out even more, and we need to find food banks to contribute to. Be aware of what your neighbor is going through, because no matter where we are as human beings, our value is in what our value is to others. honestly.
Yeah, indeed.
And as musicians, as musicians, we're prone to navel gazing because part of the creative nature that we have means there's a lot of feelers out there, and we're always trying to assess how other people value us or judge us and all that. Well, we need to just kind of focus our feelers in another direction, like other directed. And even when we're making our own music, we need to be true to ourselves. But it's performance of an art or creation of an art that you're going to share publicly should be thought of as a multi-directional activity. So it's like, think of whoever it is that you're talking to in the movie scene that your song is creating. And what can you tell them of value? Yeah, I mean, there's so much need out there, both nationally and internationally and locally. There's so much need that we, instead of shutting down and being all about ourselves and the gated community, and, join the people that are banging on pots and pans in the evenings to thank the healthcare workers that are under such duress right now and risking their lives to go take care of sick people that we love. So, other directed. There's a whole world out there that's in need of us.
Yeah, and I just immediately thought of grocery store workers too, and healthcare workers certainly taking the brunt of this. But the one place that
and people in Walmart.
Yeah.
People in all of the serving places that you buy anything from, they're risking their lives. I mean, I went to Office Depot to get some more. I think it was some more ink or something. And I could see the guy behind the counter with the mask on was scared. He was scared. And it's according to your state and your city what is deemed essential, So it's crazy right now. It's a crazy wild, wild west out there.
Yeah.
Here's another thing I would say about this era, and that is the only thing that we can't control the national agenda right now. We can't control what is going on. We just can't. But what we can control is our own environment, and that means being aware of what's around us, being aware of what we're touching, how far we are from whoever it is. Be aware of how we feel in case we need to go get tested. And being aware of the need around us and things like that. Being aware of our mental state. Being aware of what we need for sustenance so that we can give out. We can't give out if we are empty.
You've been doing online lessons for a long time, and I know that you've been doing a mix of online and in-person over your career. Are you doing anything differently on the online front other than, well, yes, everything's been forced online, but are you, as a entrepreneurial music artist, what are you doing differently to help that evolve or move along during this time?
Well, one thing is I am trying to get better at the quality of my online lessons. And so I've discovered a few things. I brainstorm with I have a classical coach that I give lessons to, and he gives lessons to me. And we brainstorm now gear as much as we brainstorm the voice. So I've discovered this because one of my students, here again, learning from everybody, one of my students is an engineer. He's also a vocalist and a lead singer of this band, but he was telling me on Zoom, there's a setting, anybody that uses Zoom and uses a digital instrument should know this, whether you're doing YouTube videos for yourself or you're talking to somebody else. But anyway, you go into the audio settings and go into advanced, and then you'll see suppress persistent background noise, and you'll also see suppress intermittent background noise. And what we should do is disable both of those, because they are, if you don't disable that and it's enabled, then it will consider your digital instrument background noise, and it will really kind of try to snuff it out and you'll get all this glitchiness. But boy, if you take it off, it's smooth as silk.
Ah, that could be annoying too if you had it on and didn't know what that was. So yeah, nice trick.
Yeah, most of the time I've just been singing, whether it's male or female. I'm trying to get way on down there.
Mm-hmm.
I've just been singing the exercise for the person, and then they just repeat it. But now I can go back to the keyboard, especially for the guys, and hit those low notes. And then I raised the level of my podcast by buying getting an audio interface rather than my webcam,
Mm-hmm.
and using a separate mic for that, and that's brought the quality up. So what I'm doing is I'm creating, the podcast stuff like you are. And so all of us teachers need to be raising the level of what we do as well.
Yeah, that's good stuff. It's so funny you mentioned getting a new mic, because I forgot that you were at one time using your webcam, but I was going to ask you, what mic are you using, by the way? Because I've been looking at mics for recording drums, and of course, whenever you go to any website that knows anything about you, they're like, hey, check out this podcasting mic. So I'm sort of back at, again at looking at the different mics. I have one that sounds great, but what I don't have is one that allows me to speak without being right on my mic, because I'm using a vocal mic, not like a broadcaster or podcaster mic. So what did you get? If I
just, I tell you what, I bought a something or another, or whatever, and I tried 3 different mics in about the $100 range.
Mm-hmm.
One that I already had, and on my voice, because of my particular voice, the one that sounded the best was the SM58. The old
nice.
SM58. I put a big fat windscreen on it, an external windscreen on it,
mm-hmm.
and I use this little scissor arm thing, and I do speak a little bit off mic, and I think you check out the podcast, you tell me what you think, but it sounds a lot warmer, richer than the webcam. I had no idea how much difference there could be.
I will check it out. And so you're kind of sort of doing something not too dissimilar from what I'm doing. I was thinking, you went out and bought a podcast mic, but that's cool. Yeah, they work great. And at least, you have, well, I do too. I'm using basically sitting at a little makeshift workstation and have a boom stand with the mic coming over at me. So, but that's good. I can't wait to hear the latest episodes.
I just go through Audacity and use it that way. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. What about, I think this ties into your most recent episode, your most recent podcast episode. What about voiceover work? For people that are actually already in that business, and people that are not in that business.
That's funny that you should say that. Mark Trust is actually getting into voiceover himself, the classical singer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a whole new field, and it is definitely lucrative and going on.
How's it a whole new field?
A ton of, other than singing, that you
sure.
You normally think of a vocal career as singing, but there's so many subfields, like the gaming industry and voiceover for like audiobook and and movie trailers, and of course there for commercials and things like that. And most voiceover artists tend to focus on one area. It's like they have a particular genre that they focus on to get the clientele and network to get the clientele in that field that they seem to be successful at. So, like the one Jody Krantz was the podcast, the audio or the voiceover talent that I interviewed for this last one, and she does mostly just commercial stuff, global companies and commercial voiceovers for companies and products. But she didn't know much at all about the gaming industry, except she knows it's very big and all the crazy characters and all that. But there's just so many over, and you have to have the gear, you have to have the online, be able to send it over the lines that you have to have. You really have to have your own studio, and it has to be just so precise. It's so clean that it's just a whole different kind of excellence that you have to look at. And then you have to be an actor when you're doing voiceover. There's a lot of acting technique that goes into it. There's also a lot of vocal technique, which is why I love working with voiceover people, because the slightest bit of a lack of vocal control will have them dropping the ends of sentences too soon, or falling into vocal fry at the end, or or just not being able to put the nuance on that line that they know they could. Well, that's where a vocal coach can come in to kind of help with that. But yes, that's a great thing that people can look into, a field.
Yeah. So based on what you know about what I do, this is kind of a gear question, but based on my work as you know it, and this question is to give people perspective on if they think they have some of the other things required, but wonder about gear. Do you think I am close to being set up for all other things being equal? Am I anywhere in the ballpark for the type of having the type of equipment that if all the other things were there, that I could actually submit high enough quality recordings to be involved in something like that?
I would have to really listen to your podcast with that ear. I'd have to put headphones on. The biggest part of it is that it's clean. I think that the components to the sound that you've got to have, it's got to be absolutely just spotless clean.
Sure.
And you have a beautiful voice, your speaking voice. So if those things are in place, you can listen for yourself through headphones. And the other thing, of course, is to run it up a flagpole, like run it up to someone who is in the voiceover business.
Sure.
The second thing is there can be no room noise.
Sure.
Which I'm hearing all over national TV guests on news shows. There's like this room noise for days. The quality is really bad. So, I mean, it's funny how bad and how badly their scenes are. Like there'll be pristine kitchens, but then there'll be funky kitchens, and there'll be bad lighting, but the room sound is really bad. This goes not just for voiceover, but also for interviews on TV.
Yeah, sure. Sammy and I were watching. My wife Sammy and I were watching the One World concert, and so I go from seeing Paul McCartney in his kitchen, who clearly just I don't know if he had his phone set up or what, and it just sounded like, oh wow, that sounds awful. And then there were the few people that are completely set up for it, clearly, and it was like a full production thing. So, but it reminded me like, oh yeah, you really have to think about what that's going to sound like when you're in that room. In his case, I think he looked like he was in his kitchen, and even the Rolling Stones did this. From each of their houses.
I saw it.
Yeah, and even I think it was Mick who's the one you're predominantly hearing, but he had a lot of room noise too, but it sounded okay. It was all right.
Well, here's the thing about that concert, and I think that's where we have to think to ourselves, okay, who is listening? What do they need from us? I think when it comes to that, a concert like the Global Citizen Concert, we have to think to ourselves, who are we talking to? Or if you're doing a TV interview, and if you're in Timbuktu and the Skype signal's really bad, it doesn't matter. You have to figure out, okay, who am I talking to? What do they need from me? And the biggest word that I think would describe what everybody needs from people doing, whether it's voiceover or guest spots or whatever, is authenticity. But you can have quality authenticity. And I think that's where I think I would have wrapped that game up with the Global Citizen, because they had time. They weren't in Timbuktu. They had time to set things up a little better. So they really should have. And some of the keyboard and the vocals, like with Billie Eilish, and also Casey Musgraves, the piano was so much louder than the vocal. I mean, do a sound check. So what I would say is, I guess, just in a, common sense kind of way, just do the best you can.
Yeah, and I knew as I was watching those performances that I was being critical of the sound of that those people come from such a different headspace too. They're not scared of just winging something, and we, on the other hand, many of us, I say we, I'll just speak to the unstarving musician community directly. We tend to obsess over what's going to happen before it happens, and even with all the best planning. And so some of those folks we saw were very were understandably cavalier about it. Although I'm with you. Those guys to a large degree could have done a little better. Some of them.
Well, and the other thing is a lot of those guys, the higher end guys like the Paul McCartneys and the Rolling Stones and people like that, they probably didn't have their road crew with them. They didn't have their production crew with them. And so they are not used to having to think in those terms. It's possible. I mean, otherwise, the only other thing you can say is that they didn't care. Yeah. But and it was just fun. They with the Stones, it was just fun. Yeah. With the keyboard and piano, I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, sure.
But a lot of the bigger artists, and here's where the bigger artists could take a little time right now and get into what their engineer does for them or their production crew does for them, to be able to do it for themselves when they have to.
Hear. Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. So I guess this is a decent enough segue. I really wanted to ask you about recording on your own. So I've been recording podcasts for a while now, but, I'm doing this demo for a new song of mine. And it's the first attempt at anything like that on my own, in my own home. Because of my experience with GarageBand, which comes from the podcast, I had a general understanding of what needed to happen to just do a single acoustic guitar and a voice to share the idea with a friend, and he knew how to do a lot more because it's what he does for a living. So he sends me back $1,000, addition to what I gave him. But so now I go through the next steps. I go through our recording the drums, and then we'll come back and possibly you and I will circle back on a one-on-one to talk about the actual the final recording of the vocals. But there's so much that could be talked about or considered, but I guess in the limited time we have, and maybe you can kind of expand on your answer by simply letting us know that you have a lot on this topic already available on judyrodman.com, or it's something you're planning to do. I know it's something I plan to do a little more of myself, but what would you say to someone who was maybe in a position like me a few weeks ago, that they're doing this for the first time, or maybe even, we always take for granted that this stuff, it was fairly easy for me, by the way, to do the demo. It was very easy. But we always take for granted that that's going to be the case with anyone. Like, who wants me to show them how to do this? This is easy. That's so not true, right? Especially when you get up into having the types of experience that, for instance, you have with teaching vocal lessons, or a myriad of other things that you do very well. What would you say to someone to guide them, encourage them?
To whom again?
For recording at home. Because
for recording at home.
Yeah, because so many of us were I was speaking to a young woman very recently who's in Nashville. She was very accustomed to co-writing. She's a seasoned performer, very young, but a seasoned performer. She's pretty darn seasoned with recording, but she's never done any of this on her own. And to my amusement, she was struggling, happy to do it though. The thing I loved was that she was just happy to learn it, but she was struggling a little bit with the technicalities of doing live streams from home, which I thought, wow, that should be a piece of cake for you because of all these other things you've done. So again, I guess I'm asking, what would you say to someone who has gone from her world, for instance, or maybe from someone who is a little bit like me who hasn't started yet? Do you have any tips?
Well, the main thing is to, again, get really logical and figure out what you're doing. There's one thing to make a really good quality work tape. I've got some recording gear here, like the Zoom H4n. your phone, our phones now even record really good work tapes. And so you can do that and preserve the songs that you're writing. If you want to go higher quality and do something where it could be something that you might even try to get placed in media, like a movie scene or TV scene or something like that. It's kind of cool if you do it because you own it, and they sometimes don't need a big orchestra. They just need the voice and the instrument, and also just the instrumental track. If you want to go, bring your quality up, YouTube is full of lessons on engineering and on setting up your own studios and things like that. And so that's what I would do first. I would just dig into YouTube tutorials on creating a recording space, and then doing it. Like what I'm doing personally, right now, I am not putting my efforts because I teach all day long. I'm not putting my efforts into my own studio, but I just got a song from my last album placed in a TV show called The Expanse, and they are open for me sending them something else. And I've got this song, and I sent them the work tape, and because they're actually friends of mine out in LA, and so media placement's all about networking. But anyway, so I was able to send them the work tape because normally you couldn't do that. And they liked the song, and they thought it was worth the gamble of me going ahead and recording it. So I'm getting a friend of mine who has her own studio. She's an incredible musician, drummer, all kinds of guitars and instruments and all kinds of things. She's, an amazing Renaissance woman. But anyway, I've worked in her studio a lot. So I'm having her build the track. And then I'm going to try, because this is an old blues song, I'm going to try using my precious little SM58 and singing a vocal in my room here and sending it to her to mix with the track and master. And hopefully that will be the quality that they need. But if I were just, trying to do this on a bigger scale with, less old blues stuff and more stuff that needs to be a little cleaner, I would need to dig into how to create an isolation space and all that. I've got software. I've just bought some software, in fact, that I can use to de-room sound my vocals, so I can and de-pop it and de-S it and things like that. So there's software that can help with a mic situation, but I mean, what I'm for is like network with an expert in what you can't do.
Right. Yeah. Good advice. And you mentioned two things I really liked, reminding us about YouTube's vast library on everything. I just yesterday, or in the evening, watched a video at the recommendation of a very established musician, drummer, recording guy, and I was asking him about miking, a specific type of miking technique that was a little minimalist. And he recommended, I'll have to put this in the notes in case anyone's interested in more specifically in what I was asking him. The question was more or less like, what do you think about recording a drum track for some, that I want to be able to do a final recording on, but not miking every drum, but sort of approaching it like we could have if we could think back to the 70s, where we had a lot of great things recorded. And he recommended a technique and sent me to a video that's maybe like 20 minutes where a guy shows different single mic placements in a room, a couple of which were, one of which was two of which were very odd to me, but they were amazing at what they did. So it was fun. So great reminder. The other one was, thank you for saying something. I could have guessed it and probably kind of inherently knew it from past conversations I had, but I think it's really important for people just to hear again what you said. And it was like, media placement is all about networking. I think that's great because I imagine that a lot of people would really like to be in that world, and it's probably a great thing for them to have heard. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Great minds think alike. At least I hope at least minds that are similar, which ours are in a lot of ways, think alike on these things. Yeah, but we've kind of seen that be true, haven't we?
Yeah, I think so. We have. So in the bit of time we have left here, I want to ask you to tell my listeners what's up with the podcast, because I think, especially now, you sort of upped your game with the with the sound quality. The content quality's always been there, but what is on the horizon and for your podcast? How frequently are you publishing these days, and do you expect that to change any?
I hope to publish more consistently, because I have not been. I've been so busy. That's one thing that this time is going to let me do, is get back to a schedule. And so I'm going to try to post new podcasts twice a month, just once every other week. And I am continuing to kind of interlace my training, my vocal training and techniques and things like that I share on certain posts, with interviews with industry people and people that are into vocal health and any voice matter with industry people. And I think I'm going to interlace a third thing that I used to do a long time ago when I first started the podcast out. And that is, I'm going to take some of the people I work with that are recording artists, and I'm going to interview them about what they're doing during this time, and also, intersperse their music into the interview. So it'll be like a little radio show. So it'll keep the podcast interesting. It'll be part vocal training, part industry interviews, and part artist sharing. And it's win-win for everybody, because then it helps them get a little more eyeballs on what they're doing and ears on what they're doing as well. But you can find it at All Things Vocal Podcast.
Cool. And you know what? I'm going to say something, since you mentioned music on the podcast. I have recently stepped away from doing that. Now, I started featuring music in a way that I thought was completely and still think was completely safe, but sad. And you may have looked into this a lot. I'm sort of saying this for the benefit of any other podcasters that might be listening who would need, good to know. But we've kind of come to a place where we have podcast trolling software that looks for music on podcasts and errs on the side of quote unquote caution, looking for music that is being played in an unlicensed manner, or in manner in which is legally not done well, and getting this can, of course, lead to getting podcasts pulled from the big providers, and Spotify in particular, because they are a music first service, so they don't particularly care for podcasts that are. This doesn't mean that you can't do it, by the way, anyone listening, but Spotify definitely does not want podcasts on there that are making it their business to feature music first and foremost, because that's what they do. But anyway,
that makes sense, because it is on podcast on there. What I'm thinking is maybe doing like a not the full track, but a partial track to of the music to kind of show what they're doing, and maybe not the full track. But mostly like maybe 2 songs on a 30-minute interview, and a partial. And also the other thing about it is my people will own their own songs, their own masters. So I'm not playing, somebody else's stuff that I'm not interviewing. So I'll get permission that way. I'll make sure. But like you say, Some of these places don't like to be competed with playing music. I'm glad you said that. I needed that information.
Yeah, and I was doing exactly what you're talking about doing. The thing that concerns me is that if there is a business that's out there that is scraping content with some new algorithms, just looking for music, will they? Like in my case, would they come across something that was once upon a time wholly owned by an artist and no longer is? I don't know. So anyway, it was just so much to worry about. I'm like, I'm not even going to do it anymore. But hopefully that will, that I don't know. Hopefully my paranoia and what's actually going on will change.
No, That's another thing that I think we all need to pay attention to, and that's the legalese. It's not a bad idea, and I've done this in the past, to get people's, signing off on that, yes, you are allowed to play this or whatever.
Absolutely.
Or I'm appearing, and I give you the worldwide rights to publish this and all that kind of stuff. So I've done that before. I need to look again at doing that. When it's not wholly owned by us, we do need to pay attention to the legal aspect of podcasts and everything else that we do.
Yeah. So, and you certainly have a lot of expertise in that particular little area too. But for anyone who's listening that maybe just didn't realize or wants to know more, I'm not the best place to get information from. I do have some, but I mean, just do some research. I know that Libsyn, Liberated Syndication, they're a podcast host, one of many, but they have a huge kind of resource library just for podcasters, and it's not just for Libsyn customers, and including a podcast about podcasting. And they talk a lot about this stuff, and they're very cool in answering listener questions too. So if they talked about it a year ago, but you have a question about it because you don't even know they talked about it a year ago, they're pretty good about answering questions. So it's certainly worth looking at.
Cool.
Judy, it was really great talking to you. When all this is over,
you as well.
Yeah. When all this is over, I'm kind of compelled to ask you what. Are you looking past this yet, or are you like a lot of us, just like, well, I'm ready for it to ease up, but I'm not even really thinking about yet what is going to directly be my life right afterwards. But are you thinking ahead? And if so, what are you thinking about?
Oh, I tell you what, I do. I think it's incredibly important for us to think through. I think we won't be able to completely predict the way the world is going to be, but we do need to keep looking down the road and not be surprised, because there's, I'm just allergic to being surprised by things. So what I'm anticipating is that it will take, and yet things will start coming back, but it will take fully a year and a half, I think, at least, and maybe 2 years before there are going to be large amounts of people going to concerts again. And that is concerts and then record plays too, but concerts mostly are the bottom line for the music industry, for making money. And it's playing on radio too and all that, but you promote it, and the artists, a lot of times the artist makes their most of their money on the road. So and they there's nothing like in person to get people knowing who you are and all that. I do think that business models are going to change for the music business. So I think we need to keep looking and see how that's going to be happening. We need to keep doing some research, not fearful, but out of absolute curiosity. Absolutely. Be prepared for this to last a year and a half to 2 years in some form and to affect our businesses. But I'm working with singers and speakers, so as far as my particular business, I've got a full load and would be okay if I didn't have a full load and all that. I'm looking at just maintaining status quo and maintaining my value for anybody that needs to do what they do, speaking-wise or singing-wise, better, and wants to train now for later, or maybe already has a vocal career that's working, like in media or the speaking voice and all that. So I think we need to see what's going on, see what is working, see what alternate streams of income that would open up for us, or we could be a part of in some way of facilitating, and stay wise and stay looking down the road, because that way we not only help ourselves but everybody else. Because if we do better, then we can bring other people along.
That's great. That is great. I like it. Judy, it's good talking with you.
You too. Thank you.
Hey, thanks again for listening. If you are loving the podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn about the various ways that you can offer your support. And again, if you're a listener, I consider you a supporter, especially if you shared it with a friend. Thank you. Look for show notes and links to most everything mentioned in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com/podcast. Thanks so much for listening. With a whole lot of gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell. Hey there, one last thing before you go. At the time of this recording, music artists and other creators are facing unusual and uncertain times. I'd like to help out if I can. My contribution is to offer you an opportunity to work with me in a coaching capacity and to only pay what you can afford if you can afford to pay anything at all. Think of it as a virtual tip jar. The point is, I'm here for you if you feel you need the help. There's a bit of a process, but it's pretty simple. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching. There's a button on that page to schedule a 15-minute consult call with me. This is just a call to find out how and if I can help you, and it's also an opportunity for you to find out if you want to work with me and for me to find out if I want to work with you. If we both feel good about it, we'll schedule your sessions, and I'll also answer any questions you have about how it works, including the pay what you want or what you can afford tip jar thing. So go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to learn more. I'll have a limited number of slots, obviously, so if this sounds like something you can use right now, go to unstarvingmusician.com/coaching to learn more and or to get started. Ciao.